Hi, my name is Lowell Gallin, and I would like to welcome you to this evening's installment of the Lowell Gallin Show, my internet TV talk show based here in the land of Israel, city of God, Jerusalem. I'm very happy to have as my guest this evening someone who is usually my co-host, Dr. Les Glassman.
Well, thank you, Lowell. Thank you so much for having me.
And in this case, you're welcome. He is the interviewee and shortly the speaker in our lecture series. Today is Thursday, March 22nd, 2018. It is the 6th day of Nisan 5778. A week from now, we have Passover. A couple of weeks later, Lag BaOmer. Not that long after, on May 13th, we have Yom Yerushalayim and the Jerusalem Liberation Day. And on the 14th, which is the Gregorian date for the establishment of the State of Israel, which is the 70th anniversary of the state, we have some new guests in town. The United States Embassy is hanging out at Shingle. Now they're discussing where. Is it going to be on Agron Street? Is it going to be in Arnona? It's going to be. And so we have a very happy Chag ahead of us. And a week after that, we have Shavuot, Pentecost, a lot's going on. Now, our topic for tonight's interview is a inspiring topic. It's about someone who chose to do good in life and death circumstances where he had to act quickly, and he did. Senpo Sugihara, the Japanese consul in Kovno.
That's right.
And Dr. Glassman, who frequently travels to Kovno.
Not frequent enough, but I have been there.
Are your family from Kovno?
South of Mariupol, south of Kovno.
Is going to talk about Senpo Chiun Sugihara, who issued 6,000 visas, plus rescuing the entire Mir Yeshiva and sent them off to Japan. Dr. Glassman, tell us about this remarkable man and how he came to do this, especially as I understand from my research against the orders of his own government. Is that correct?
It is correct. What's interesting about Senpo Sugihara is in his lifetime, he was unknown. He actually was a very promising diplomat. He was stationed in many places before his position in Kovno, in Kaunas, in Lithuania. And interestingly enough, there never was a Japanese consulate or embassy in Lithuania. It's fascinating when you go into the history. But because he was born on January the 1st, 1900, a very bright guy. He had his own mind, he had his own way of thinking. His father wanted him to become a doctor, medical doctor. He promised his father he'd go to the exam, but he didn't want to become a doctor. So at the exam he did go, but he didn't fill in the paper. And he became a teacher. And he went to Russia, where he worked a bit for the foreign ministry, and that's where he learned Russian. He was fluent in German. He was a very promising and upcoming diplomat. Then he was posted, before his position in Kovno, he was posted in Finland. And in the outbreak of the war, the Japanese, knowing that he was fluent in both Russian and German, they decided to send Sugihara, to Kovno, which was the capital at that time, to open a consul. The other consul that they had was in Riga, in Latvia, but they never had in Lithuania. And part of his position there was to actually, because of his knowledge of German and Russian, was to gain intelligence on what the Germans were doing. Even though Japan and Germany were allies, Japan still wanted to know what the Germans were doing, if they were going to use that going through Lithuania, invade it, and in that way, what would happen with Russia, with their troops, and that would free up a lot of the Japanese troops if they didn't have to guard certain borders. So his position was actually quite interesting. He was not only a diplomat, but he did a lot of intelligence. How he got to save over 6,000 Jews, the whole Mir Yeshiva, is one of the wonders of Jewish history. It's a most fascinating story. Why did he do it? And that's the topic of our talk tonight. Why on earth did somebody do that? Knowing, and he told his wife, and his wife was behind him, and his children were behind him, knowing that if he signs these visas, he's going to lose his job.
And this is a man from a highly disciplined authoritarian culture where taking independent action, which is not a good career advancement choice in any culture, is discouraged.
Sure,
so he had his wife and children, the whole family was behind him to do this. When did he issue the first visa to the first Jew? Did they approach him or did he approach them?
So what we're going to be talking about, and it will be the main part of the talk, is really why did he do it? Why did he not only put his neck out, but he put his whole career on the line? He did lose his job. He was fired. He lost not only his position, he lost his kavod, his honor. And in Japanese culture, to lose one's honor is losing everything in a way. He had no money. He had to go work in Russia. That's a place where he managed to find a bit of, that he could gain a bit of an income for his family. He went through a very, very difficult time. His one son died after they were interned after the war. And he was actually fired. And he was unknown. Nobody knew who he was. He remained very quiet. Not only that, he was a very modest person. When he actually did give the visas, and we'll get to how he did that, the Jews that he gave the visas to, those in Kovno, he didn't tell them that he's going against the government. They thought that the Japanese consul and the Japanese government were issuing the visas. So there was another very, very important part, which is not really that well known. So the two main people that I think had a tremendous, well, there were many people that had a tremendous influence and an impact on his decision. One is a 12-year-old boy called Soli Gano. Soli, he's outside Israel, he's very well known. He wrote a book, Light on Candle. He's a personal friend, most amazing today. He lives in Israel, he's 90 years old. He was a little boy that, when the war started, I'll just briefly, but we'll go into it in our lecture tonight. When the war started, a lot of the Jews crossed the border.
When you say the war started, you mean the Nazi German invasion
when they
Operation Barbarossa in January?
When they invaded Poland.
That was September 1st, 1939.
That's right. A lot of Jews actually left Poland and they crossed the border to independent Lithuania.
What did the Lithuanians do with them when they got there?
So that's also very interesting. I spoke with the Lithuanian ambassador at a conference on anti-Semitism
the ambassador
2 days ago.
To Israel?
To Israel, sure, and the vice ambassador. And Lithuania actually accepted, it was interesting, this is also not really recognized, but many Jews left Poland and crossed the border into Lithuania, and they were housed there.
How many?
There were a lot of refugees.
That takes time and money at a time when the world was not doing so good economically. And yet the Lithuanians did that.
They allowed them to come through. They didn't send them back. They were helped by the Jewish community in both Kovno and Vilna. And this is to show you how, by helping your fellow Jews, just shows how special the Jewish community was. Because what happened on Chanukah 39, this little boy, Sadi, he was 12 years old, his parents gave him Chanukah geld.
That's December 1939.
December 39, his parents gave him Chanukah geld, money for Chanukah gift. And what happened was, the next day, he was alone at home. His sister and his brother and his parents were out. A woman knocks on the door, and she says, is there any money in the house to help the fellow Jews that have come from Poland that are destitute? So Soli, being 12 years old, with a kind heart, all the Chanukah geld, all the money his parents gave him, he gave to her. Anyway, he's walking along the main avenue in Kovno. It's called Lefkas Avenue. It's a boulevard, a beautiful boulevard. I've been there. It's really quite incredible. And he sees an advert for Laurel and Hardy. I don't know if our viewers are there. He wanted to see Laurel and Hardy.
Okay.
But he had no money because he had given it all away. So he went to his aunt. His aunt, her name was Anushka. She had a confectionery shop. And it so happened to be, we don't believe in coincidences, but Sugihara, who had just been posted to Kaunas to Kovno, was there in the confectionery shop buying chocolates or sweets for his own children. Anyway, Soli tells his aunt that he gave a bit of charity. Can she just give him it was called lot, a bit of money that he can go see the movie? So they had a very close connection. She said definitely she goes to the till, And then she tells her client, Sugihara, her customer, this is my nephew, he's given a bit of charity, I'm just going to give him a bit of money to see a movie. So Sugihara walked up to Soli and he took out of his pocket some money to give Soli. And Soli said to him, I can't take from you, you're not my family. So Sugihara said to him, I'll be your uncle. What's very interesting is us kids growing up in South Africa, we used to call our parents friends uncle and aunt, even though it was a sign of respect. Anyway, Soli being 12 years old, when he heard Sugihara say, I'll be your uncle, he said, well, if you're my uncle, you have to come to our house for Hanukkah, for the Hanukkah party. And he went. He went with his wife and his wife's sister that was babysitting. She came, she was also in the console. And Anushka. And they all went Motzei Shabbat on Saturday night. They went to the Ganor family. And he developed an instant connection with the Ganor family.
Okay, now we're talking December 1939. The Nazi German invasion wasn't for another June 1941. For another 2 years, so there was an interval.
It was the middle of 40 that the Russians then invaded.
The Russians invaded, but the Russians didn't kill the Jews.
No, the Russians took over.
The Russians came in 1940.
So what happened is that Greenblatt, a father and a daughter, their wife, the mother actually had been killed. They had escaped from Poland, and they were at the Ganor family, and they were there enjoying the Hanukkah party, and they couldn't believe that at this party was a diplomat. I mean, in 1939, which diplomat would be in a Jewish home in Kovno? It was unheard of. It was so rare. Anyway, Greenblatt, you just can't believe it that there sitting at the table is this Japanese diplomat. He tells him how bad the situation is in Poland. And he mentions maybe he can help him with a visa. Maybe he can get him out of the situation that he's in.
Who mentioned to who?
Greenblatt, the Polish refugee, asked Sugihara, and that's where we get the first mention of visas coming about.
That's how it starts.
But what happened is that, as we have Jewish geography, Greenblatt obviously spoke to other Polish Jews who he knew, friends of his, relatives, and there was a guy called Zorach Verhaftig. Now, Zorach Verhaftig is a very interesting fellow. He's in Israel, modern Jewish history. He is a signatory to the Declaration of Independence. His signature is right next to David Ben Gurion's. He was also a member of the in the Knesset. He was a member of a deputy minister, and then he was a minister for religion for over 10 years. Zorach Verhaftig was stationed in Kovno. He came from Belarus, and then he grew up in Warsaw. He was a very successful lawyer, and then he went to Kovno, and he worked for the Mizrahi party. He was a very Zionistic, from a very Zionistic family. His father was very close to the Chazon Ish in Bnei Brak, very, very close. But they were a very Zionistic, very learned family, very scholarly family, but a very Zionistic family. And he got a certificate for him and his wife to go back to Palestine. It was the time under the British where these certificates were extremely rare. It saved your life if you got one. And what he did, which is remarkable, he actually gave the certificate, a life-saving certificate, to his uncle. And he said, I have to be here in Kovno to help fellow Jews. He saw the writing on the wall. He knew that it was not going to be good in Lithuania, that the Jews need to get out. Anyway, he had heard about the Japanese consul that had this very close connection with the Jews, with the Ganor family, and that he had a kind heart. Anyway, he approached Sugihara. And when Sugihara, there's that famous picture of a whole lot of Polish refugees outside the consul, and Sugihara comes outside and he sees a whole, maybe 100, 200 people standing outside the consul. And he says, well, let's have a delegation of 5. I can't see everybody. Zorach Verhaftig was the lead of that 5 that came in. That delegation of 5 of the refugees that came in to see Sugihara, Zorach Verhaftig was the leader of that delegation. And he said, there's a whole story that they had entry visas to Carousel, which they got from the Dutch. There was an honorary consul in Kovno that gave from Carousel, that's near Suriname, the Caribbeans, an entry visa. That's also a whole story with Tel Yeshiva, which we'll also go into a bit.
So how did Semple Sugihara
happened,
get from one visa to 6,000?
So what happened was that he, Zorach Vahaftik, and it's so important that people know the history, and the whole Mir Yeshiva, and everybody should know that.
Where is Mir?
Mir is here in Yerushalayim.
No, but where was it there?
Mir was in Poland.
It was in
Today
Poland.
It's part of Belarus. So what happened now, I'll just briefly, because I know time's short, what happened is that he pleaded with Sugihara and the other 5 in the delegation, saying that we are desperate, that we really need to get out of Lithuania, that we do have entry visas that the Dutch consul have given us for Curacao, but we need exit visas.
Is that Jan Svartendick?
Very good.
Okay.
So what happened was Sugihara said he needs to get permission. He can issue a few by himself, but for a whole group of people, for a couple of hundred, he didn't know that it was going to be 2,000. He said he'll need permission. So he telexed Japan.
Yes.
With the permission, he spoke to his wife and his family, and his wife Yokiko and his children urged him. They said, you have to help the people outside. He telexed Japan 3 times, and each time Japan said no. The telex went to Berlin, to the Japanese consul and the embassy in Berlin and in Tokyo, and they do have the records of these telexes. Each time they said no, definitely no, and for sure not no. And then the people were waiting outside, and then his conscience took over. He felt a deep connection with the Jewish people, and he decided, he came outside and he said he's going to issue the visas. He didn't say that I'm doing it on my own behalf. He didn't say that I'm going against my government. He said, I'm going to issue the visas. And he started issuing the visas.
Does that mean he took a piece of paper, stamped it, and they came one after the other?
What was amazing is to issue the visas, if you look at the Japanese script, and if you look at a picture of the visas, it's very involved. It's with Japanese writing. Each visa took quite a while to do. And he did it very properly.
What year, what month, and what year are we in at this point?
So we're talking about the end of July.
Of what, 1940?
1940.
So it's still before the Nazis invaded.
What happened is that word got round that things were getting urgent now, because Russia had now invaded Lithuania. It was no more independent.
And July 1940 would have been after the Nazi German defeat of Belgium, Holland, and France,
so
England.
Time is moving on, and Sugihara asked the Russian, because he knew Russian so well, he said, please, can you delay the closure of the embassy? And what happened is that
the closure of the Russian embassy,
of the Japanese embassy in Kovno, because they wanted all the embassies to close. And a lot of the embassies did close, but the Japanese consul in Kovno remained. It remained for a couple more days or weeks, and that enabled Sugihara to write as many visas as he could.
So the Russians agreed.
They did agree.
Did they know what he was doing?
So it's very interesting. In the consul, people would come, and how did we save the whole Mir? So there was a guy, Moshe Zupnik. Moshe Zupnik was one of the students in the Mir. The Rosh Yeshivas also heard from the Mir Finkel that there was this kind Japanese consul general that was issuing visas, life-saving visas. So they sent Moshe Zupnik. He took 300 passports. 300 passports of the Bochrim, of the students of the Mir, and he met with Sugihara. Tonight we're going to see a video of Moshe Zupnik, and Sugihara said, okay, if you're prepared to help, we'll sign it. And the ironies of this whole thing, one of the people that helped him write the visas was a German worker in the consul.
A German?
He actually helped also sign these visas that saved the Mir Yeshiva. And by saving the Mir Yeshiva, it actually saved Yiddishkeit.
Where's the Mir Yeshiva now?
Today it's here in Jerusalem.
In Jerusalem.
It went to Shanghai. First of all, went on the train to Vladivostok. Sugihara
the Trans-Siberian Express? That's a long train ride.
Sugihara went to the Russian consul and he said, I have refugees that need to use the Trans-Siberian Railroad to Vladivostok. Do you give permission? They were blown away that there was a Japanese who spoke such fluent Russian. So they were so impressed. So they said, okay. And he got permission to use the Trans-Siberian Railroad.
Who paid for all the train tickets?
That's a whole story. How they got
that's a lot of people.
That's
a long train
ride. They got a lot of money. Because
that's not Duke Ellington's Take the A train. That's about 4,000 miles.
It took a long time, but they went to Vladivostok, and from Vladivostok they got boats that went to Tsuruga and then Kobe, and then eventually Shanghai. And some got visas to go to America, and some to Eretz Israel, but the majority stayed in Shanghai. There's a whole story how it got to Shanghai, but the whole thing is that Sugihara did lose his job.
Immediately or after the war?
After the war. He was interned after he was in Romania. He suffered badly. His one son died, and then he went back to Japan, and in Japan he was dismissed.
Right.
What happened is, and I think we should end off over here, in 1969, many of the survivors wanted to thank him. They wanted to repay him. And when they did meet with him, he said he didn't do it for money. He didn't do it for reward, and he refused. And they did manage to meet him. There was a Nisri who was one of also those fives that they met him. Zorach Vahavtig also met him. He came to Israel. They invited Sugihara to come to Israel. The Israeli government paid for his youngest son to be educated at Hebrew University, which he was. And Sugihara came to visit his son. A year before he died in 86. In 85, Yad Vashem awarded him Chasidei Umot Olam, righteous amongst the Gentiles. It hit the world headlines. It was in papers and media all over the world. Then Mrs. Sugihara, Yokiki Sugihara, wrote a book called Visas for Life.
His wife.
His wife. That was made into a movie. When a movie was shown, and I have the movie, when it was shown on Japanese television, he became the Anne Frank or the Oscar Schindler of Japan. Today, Sugihara is regarded as one of the top 10 heroes of all time Japan.
By the Japanese?
You can ask any Japanese. The stamps of Sugihara, the monument where he was born, they made a monument. He is very, very well known in Japan.
So I give a...
and rightfully so. And our intention is that he should be just as well known in Japan. There's Karasatov. We have to have the gratitude what he did, saving over 6,000, he wrote over 2,000 visas. When he left on the train, as he was leaving on the train, he handed out visas.
Les, I want to thank you for this interview, and I'd like to say to you and to our viewers and listeners, 2 messages from this. Never feel, whoever you are, wherever you are, that what you do doesn't make a difference. The physics of what's the expression, and since we're talking about Japan, if a butterfly flaps its wings in Tokyo, can it cause an avalanche in Tierra del Fuego in Argentina? The answer is yes, and now physicists can actually work out equations. The butterfly effect. You drop the stone in the water and the waves start, and some stones fall down the mountain, become an avalanche. This is not just a cute expression, it's actually real in physics. So that's just physics with physical objects. Now let's think about spiritual.
Well, Lowell, can I just mention?
Go right ahead.
This little Soli, who lives, thank God, he's 90 years old, by his action of giving a little charity and by inviting a total stranger to his house, he actually changed
That's
Jewish
a good
history.
point. This, as far as we know from what Les is saying, the ground zero for how the whole thing started was a 12-year-old boy giving some Hanukkah geld to a Japanese man who became uncle.
To help fellow Jews, and then inviting a total
One
stranger
thing led
to his
to
home.
the other, and everybody got involved. The courage is courageous. The Russians got involved. The German who worked there got involved. And he was persecuted in his life by the Colonel Blimps, as I would say, the apparatchiki, the bureaucrats who didn't like someone who broke the rules. But in the end, he was honored while he was still alive. And it also shows, for each people, whoever you are, wherever we are, we want to be proud of something good in our culture and our history. And while it's important to remember the dead, the Holocaust, the Jewish and the non-Jewish victims, friendship between peoples is planted primarily in gardens, not graveyards, which doesn't mean you don't remember the graveyards or put flowers on the graves. As Oskar Schindler, and the several times I visited his grave here in the Catholic cemetery, there's always flowers and rocks. I've never seen who put them. They're primarily planted in gardens, and here you see, according to Les, this man is now a national hero of Japan. I had no idea.
One of the top 10.
He's become a living legend in Japanese culture. I had no idea of this. So, to all of our viewers and listeners, do what's right. Don't think what you do doesn't matter. Think of Sali Ganor when he was 12 years old in Kovno with his Hanukkah geld. And remember that. So we've had a very inspiring interview with Dr. Glassman.
Thank you so much, Lowell. I
on an
appreciate the
uplifting
opportunity.
subject. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you so much, and to all our listeners out there, Chag Sameach for Pesach, the time of freedom. We
Right.
all wish you a Chag Sameach, a happy Passover.
And to conclude, today is, we always conclude as we begin by saying where and when. It's Thursday, March 22nd, 2018, the 6th day of Nisan 5778. We are speaking to you from the land of Israel, the city of God, Jerusalem. We wish you a Shabbat Shalom and a Chag Sameach for all the upcoming Chagim, for Passover and Shavuot Pentecost. Les, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Lowell. I really appreciate it.
Thanks to our viewers and watchers for listening and watching.
Thank you.
Now we're going to go record a fascinating lecture too.
Wow, I hope it was okay.